And I think he speaks with a New Jersey accent, if I'm not mistaken.
With a Russian one, actually.
Oh, okay.
So I came from California yesterday, so I'm still a little bit jet lagged, so it's 7 a.m. for me. Still, so sorry if I fall asleep a little bit. So, where's my... So I'll present you the way we work with software development. We're a small company. We have about, I'm a leader of this company, I'm a founder. We have about 100 people working right now. We do software development mostly. So we develop software, and sometimes we also develop this for hardware projects as well. So because I think the context of the conference is more about system engineering, so I'm saying that we are not just purely in the software part. Our software interacts with the hardware as well. So the key thing which I want to present is that the way we develop software, the way people communicate in our projects, the way we manage programmers. And a little bit of a background. I started doing this about 15 years ago. For 11 years, I was doing it in the office. So we had about 100 programmers sitting in the office. It was back in Eastern Europe, and there was like normal traditional project organization. It was in the office development. And about 4 years ago, we transitioned this model to no office development. So there is no central place where people come together to work on the project. And I want to ask you, how many of you have seen projects which have no central place, no central office where people can join together to do some work? You've seen this project. Good, so not so many of you. But this is, I think this is quite unique and quite new, and this is what we're doing for the last 4 years, and it works. And when we started to do that, there were many problems and many difficulties which we needed to resolve. And the most interesting thing was we invented the methodology which we called extremely distributed software development. You can check the website. It's called xdsd.org, and this is the methodology which we enforce in our projects. And the rule number one in this methodology is that everybody gets paid for deliverables. So we don't pay programmers, we don't pay people who work with us for the time they spend on the projects. We pay only for the results they deliver. And that was an interesting concept in the beginning, and it was difficult to understand how it's possible to do, because people are used to, programmers traditionally used to be paid for months or for a week or for an hour, but not for the results which we wanted them to get from it. But we needed that, because in this distributed environment where we work, and the contractors we work with, they're basically like cowboy coders. So they don't really care about the project they work on. They just jump in, jump out. They're good, high qualified programmers, but they're not really attached to any organization. There's like project for them here and project for them there, but they're not sitting together in one office for a long time. They don't feel themselves as being part of something which they belong to. And that's why it's really important to manage them in that way. Just paying them for the results and making sure that every time we spend some money from the project budget, we get something back from developers, from programmers. And that was quite difficult. And in order to do that, basically that was the concept which we introduced. So we were saying that if it's not done, there's no money. And that was really controversial and really not something which people expect in software development, because in most cases we just don't know what is done. We just don't know what means by done. And that's what I want to stop at. This is my main slide, and say that was the main problem for us, is to define and to formalize the definition of done. You probably know what definition of done is. This is I think the term coming from Agile or something. So this is the definition of, this is the official formal declaration of how the task is done comparing to what is not done. So when you give the task to the programmer, then it is our job as project managers to define this task in a way that there's only one non-ambiguous definition of when the task will be done and when it can be closed and then paid for. And that took a lot of time. So first of all, we needed to figure out how to control the quality of the task, because if you we give programmers like really small tasks, and each task is usually about less than an hour of size. So we basically, the way we manage projects, we distribute a lot of micro tasks to many programmers. We outsource these tasks to them. They complete them, we pay for them. So our job on the project management side is to break down the scope of the project into smaller pieces and then make sure that each piece has its own definition of done. So we need to be sure that when the task is going to the programmer and it's coming back, we both clearly understand what the contract is. So we understand each other and we both know what the result is expected. So that took a lot of time. And then now I'm getting back to the main point of the presentation, is that we started to realize that meetings as a tool for exchanging information, the traditional tool for exchanging information in the project, is not used anymore in our projects. So we stopped to use traditional meetings as they're done in many other projects, as you probably know them. Like people sit together, or maybe they start a conversation on Skype or any other instrument, and they sit for an hour or longer and discuss things. In our projects, we saw that there is no need for that anymore. So the programmers, as long as the definition is done is clear, as long as they understand exactly what is expected from each of them, we stopped to see the necessity to do any meetings at all. So that the flow of information, like it's done in traditional way, in traditional project manager, in traditional projects, where people talk in order to exchange information and to resolve problems and to resolve conflicts and to find out whether something is done or something is not done, it just disappeared from our projects. So we stopped to use meetings. We even did, well, we had them when, like I said, we were developing software for 10 years before, for 11 years. And we have many of these meetings, like time-consuming meetings every second day. And in this setup, where people are completely distributed and they work from their own places, and the definition of done is clear, people just stopped using meetings at all. So they switched to a different instruments instead of meetings. We're using source code, which is the #1 channel for information flow. So the source code by itself is where people exchange information. They write code, they see code, they basically write code and they read code. That's how they communicate, a lot. We have tickets, the ticketing system, where people submit their questions, they get their answers from other team members, they submit bugs, they submit pull requests, they create feature requests, so they use ticketing system for the information exchange. They use wiki pages, where people also communicate through making changes to the wiki. You know what wiki pages are. We use Git as also an instrument of information exchange. When you commit something, you put comments on that, you create release tags, you create some branches. So this is also the way to communicate. And also we have shared documents. So these instruments, according to our experience, that's what we see, completely replaced meetings at all. So, and I think that happened because we managed to define, to make sure the definition is done is clearly defined in our case. So for each single task, for each small task we outsource to our programmers, we know exactly what is expected. We know exactly what kind of result is expected. We know exactly what the rules are for resolving questions, for getting answers for the questions and resolving conflicts. And that's why these tools are enough, and they're powerful enough, and they're suitable enough to basically doing what the traditional meetings were doing before. So I think this is how I think that's what we achieved, and that's what we see. And I can give you, to summarize, because I'm close to the end, I can give you some numbers. Yeah, this is the summary of that. So now I think that a truly result-oriented team actually does not need meetings at all. Because if every single programmer is result-oriented and he or she knows exactly what needs to be done in this specific task and knows how much is going to be how much is going to be the reward for this result, then actually making these meetings and talking to someone and spending extra time on these informal communications is not what people will need, and is not what the people will need and the team will need. Again, I'm speaking from the practical experience. And there are some numbers. So over 18 months, the last 18 months, we've been working for 8 customers. We completed or still working on 28 projects. open source and closed source. So sometimes we do open source project as well. 132 programmers took part of this development in total. We spent and paid for about 23,000 hours for these programmers. And we wrote approximately 300,000 lines of code. And we've done 0 meetings. So there was zero informal communications between programmers. So none of these people, none of these 132 people ever communicated to each other in any informal way, like meetings or Skype calls or emails or maybe personal meetings. So everything was done in completely isolated, clearly defined small tasks. So that's probably what I wanted to say, and I want to say again that this was possible because the definition of done, I think, was clearly defined, because we managed to define that, and that's why the necessity for the meetings is completely gone. We just don't need them. That's what I wanted to show. What do you think about that? Does it sound unusual?
It does, because one of 100 customers will be able to define what done is on a particular individual task, and maybe 1 out of 1,000 will really know what they want and be able to communicate that clearly enough to be able to get one and done out of it, so to speak. The government has operated from the extreme difference for years because of the misconception that software was a mystery. Nobody could understand software. It's not that way anymore. Everybody understands software these days, okay? You don't think so? I mean, look at how many people go out and develop apps that never did anything before in their lives. Couldn't pass a high school math test. They're out there developing apps, right? Because they know enough about doing coding or whatever in software. The ball has shifted. So I can see where this could work, but you as a program manager should be held on a pedestal in awe. If you can define that well to your programmers what they need to do and how they need to do it, that it can be meeting free, because mostly those meetings are being replaced by all those other pieces, the wiki and all that other stuff. And that'll work as long as your programmer is diligent enough, and and I guess has worked long enough for the team now, 132 programmers. They know they have to rely on those things to get the answers, because they're not going to be able to say, hey, we'd like to get everybody together and ask them questions. That's just not going to happen.
That's true, and I'll get back to your first comment about the customer. So this is really true. This is our problem. So programmers do understand what is definition of done. They can communicate to each other using these tools, but customers are not as disciplined and are not as smart to use these tools instead of meetings. So we do have these problems. The customers is the only component in our whole infrastructure, is the only element which requires meetings. So we do talk to customers. I mean, that the product, that like requirements analysts and people who are responsible for requirements, they do have meetings with customers. But programmers communicate to each other without any meetings. So definitely some of our customers do understand that these tools are a way better way to resolve, to send information through and to organize the flow of information. But some customers are not that disciplined and not advanced, and they still want to use the meetings. So yes.
And I think your success is very easily understandable from the point of view, those of us, I started developing software. That's where my career started. I was a programmer, okay? Not 1 in 10 programmers want to be that guy that has to go out and talk to somebody else. They want to sit in the corner and they want to do what they have to do and not talk to anybody else. They're not gregarious people. They're, am I right or am I wrong? They're, hey, if I can sit here in my pajamas and not have to leave the house and do all my work and get everything done, that's the way I like it. And that's exactly what you have oriented your whole company towards. Those type of people that aren't effective in meetings because they don't want to share anything in meetings. They can go and look and say, oh, I see what this guy did because he looked at his code. They understand each other through their code, not through verbal communications.
That's also true. Yeah, that's also true. So some people just can't work without meetings, and these people are not really a good fit for our model. So we try. Not every programmer can work with us. We tried many of them, But that's definitely true. Some people are really a good fit because they're introverts, probably because they enjoy working with structured information and properly organized information. But some people just enjoy talking to other people. Yeah.
I was wondering if you could give us some of the key elements, at least from a software development perspective, of what done looks like, so that we could get a better understanding of your methodology. But then I guess I'd ask you, since this is a system engineering conference, if you could maybe postulate if there's some attributes of that that might be applicable at the systems level or the program management level, as you might call it, where you actually have to interact with the customer. Do you think that any of those techniques might be extendable, if you will, or abstractable up to the systems program level, so that we could have a vision of no meetings at the system level? Would there be any of that? If we could define the definition of done at a higher level, could we get to that at a higher level, do you believe, with your experience?
Yeah, I think the key, the most important, well, it could be a long story, but I'm trying to make it short. I think the key principle here is that the programmer or a system engineer or anybody should not start working on the task unless the definition of done is clear. So that's probably the most important thing. So when we give the task to somebody and the task is not properly defined, we have that a lot, we have these situations a lot, then we give the programmer or a system engineer or anybody else the ability and permission to say, I don't understand this task, take it back and make it clearer for me. So this way, and we have a lot of this back and forth, throwing this task back and forth until the task is properly defined. In traditional projects, I think people resolve that by just sitting together and discussing and finding out, okay, maybe cutting some corners or something like that. But in our case, we just clearly define, we clearly say to everybody that if you take the task and start working on that, and then you come back and say, I didn't understand what it meant, then it's your problem. So I mean, you're not gonna be paid if the result is not satisfying the person who created the task. So we give programmers and engineers and everybody the permission to ask for a clearer explanation, for better definition of done. That's probably the big answer. And then how technically it's happening, it depends on the project, it depends on the tools and the type of task. Some tasks are for writing code, some tasks are for writing documentation, some tasks are for DevOps operations, some tasks could be for modeling or, I don't know, writing some UML diagrams. So it depends on that. But every time the implementer of the task, the person who is assigned to the task, has to have the permission and ability and rights to say that this is not clear for me and I'm not going to start it unless it's clear. Or maybe I will do a little bit which is clear for me, and then the rest of it I can't understand and then give it to somebody else. So we allow people to push back, which makes them way more comfortable to say that yes, this definition of done is clear for me, I'm going to do this task, and then I'll be paid. I think the same is applicable to system engineering. So every time, I think that's what I've seen in many projects before. People just start working having no understanding of what actually needs to be done. They just start working, hoping that they will give some information later, and something will be cleared up on the way, further down the road. And in the end, we have some messy, a lot of hours spent, a lot of documentation created, a lot of code written, but we don't really know what it was done for. So we're asking people we're putting the responsibility on their shoulders. We're saying that if you take the task, then it's completely your responsibility to complete it. If you complete it, then you get the rewards, you get the payment. This is what the definition of done is about, I think. So for system engineering, it's the same. Yeah.
Clarify a question on that, and then follow up on sort of program management of microservices. But with respect to that question, what are the tools and mechanisms for clearly defining the definition of done? I think you talked earlier that none of the developers talk to each other, but I assume that program management, if that's the term used, and the implementers have to talk to each other, especially when they have that right to clarify the definition of done. Is that correct? Are they still meeting, or is that still used with other methods?
We're trying to avoid all the possible meetings, like all of them. We're trying to avoid. We're trying to use these instruments, these 5 instruments, on all levels. We even ask our customers to use them. When new customers come on board and come to us and we start a new project, we're just saying, they always start to organize a meeting, start trying to call me or trying to call project architect or somebody from the project and explain what needs to be done. And we're always asking, like, could you please give us this information in a paper form, in an electronic format, in some document, and then it will be easier for us to start working on that, and then everything will be more manageable. But it's not happening always, unfortunately. So we don't have meetings between programmers, but we do have this informal communication chats or meetings with customers. So the product management or project management on that level, unfortunately, we still have the meetings. We're trying to find a way how to get rid of them completely, because that will, if we don't have meetings on all levels, then basically the whole project becomes way more manageable, because these tools are, besides everything I said before, these tools are very traceable. So everything that happens there, it's visible from the start of the project till the end of the project. So if something was discussed on a ticket, for example, some discussion happened there, it stays with the project for a year, for 2 years. We can always get back to that original discussion and see why the decision was made. In case of a meeting, it's not possible. Even if you record the meeting and put the notes of the meeting, it's really difficult to, you have to listen back to all the recordings of all the meetings. That's really difficult. So, but in this case, if the information stays in electronic format with the project, together with everything, then in 2 years you can get back to original piece of information and see why the decision was made. So we're trying to explain it to our customers as well, but they are always trying to jump in and say, no, I'm going to call you anyway because it's easier for me, it's faster. Most of them just don't realize the importance of this information, of the value of this information which stays in the project. They think that the current moment is way more important than the future.
From a systems engineering position, your ticket is the description of the requirement. The wiki is your reference document. Your shared documents are probably something like a ConOps. Where are we going? What does it need to do? How do we get there? Your source code really is the foundation of the process. A programmer can look and say, oh, they did this, this, and this. What needs to happen next? That's what they're paying me to do, the next part. I mean, it's like filling in the butt. I'm driving from here to Chicago. I got to stop for gas. Well, what gas stations are between here and Chicago? Each one of those are a piece of the puzzle. That's what a programmer will see from a software point of view in this that we don't see. The one variable in developing software systems is that they've tried to simplify is the key thing that's been the cost driver all along. The government has paid, how many people will know what a cost plus contract is? Okay? How many deliverables are there with a cost plus contract? You put up 0 because you're only buying time. The deliverable is, oh, by the way, a nice to have after it's done. Once you paid for his time, if you got something out of his time, you're good. If you didn't, you write another cost plus contract and you hope the next guy gives it to you, right?
Exactly.
So that's exactly what they've simplified, and I think we're right at the end.
Thank
so
you.
Yeah, well, actually a minute.
So if you want to
there's any
try, come to me, I'll give you my card. You can try a project with us.
You got one more question.
One more
It
question.
would appear that you have a tremendous amount of data.
Yeah, a lot of data.
Have you mined any of that data for process improvement or reuse, et cetera?
That's a good question. We're working on that. We just started intensively using this system about 18 months ago, and this is the amount of data we collected so far. So we're starting to do that because we didn't have a lot of data like a year ago. Now we have more and more. We can analyze that. We're starting to do that to improve the process. That's right. Yeah. Because in some projects right now we have, for example, for the ticketing system, we have 2,000 tickets. So over a year, people had communications or discussions in 2,000 different tickets. So this is a lot of data for us to mine and to analyze. So definitely that's the next step for us.
Which means you would need to get to a centralized schema, for lack of a better term. So when someone uses a verb or a noun, everybody knows what that means.
Yeah, something like that. Yeah, that would be possible. Of course, and we can also benchmark projects. So in one project we have this, for example, intensity of tickets and code commits and communication disputes or whatever. And another project we have a different picture. We can compare them and see which project is going the wrong direction. Maybe one project has too many problems and too many issues, and we need to pay attention to that because the numbers of this project are actually off. I mean, comparing to 15 different other projects. so we can benchmark to each other.
The one metric I'm sure you track and don't even realize it is, if I give the program, give the code to this guy, he always gets it done right, and he gets it done in a simplified manner on
Yes.
time.
Yeah.
He knows his go-to guys. He knows who he can count on. And he tries to break other people into that mode to where his decisions, where they look very complex to us up front, become simpler and simpler once he knows you're the go-to guy, and you're the girl I need to talk to about this. Oh, and the guy in the back there, yeah, he takes care of all our test stuff. So, you know, once he has that mapped out, this complex unknown software puzzle is really simplified. And he does, I think he does a hell of a job at managing the program. So thanks for your time. Enjoyable. And your time is up, and we'll be starting the next one in about 5 minutes. Thanks again.
Thanks.